Excellent. Okay. Anybody, did you have a question, Brian? Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Michael, what role did theater play in your childhood and upbringing?
Well, I was running around with teeth, you know, that I would take and cut I would go out to the stores during Halloween, buy the fangs, and cut the little points off and put those in and pretend I was Julius Kelp, you know, and drive everybody crazy. And I was always trying to put together shows. And
he also knew he would never be a dentist.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin.
Okay.
Went to the University of Wisconsin and was a theater major. And I stayed involved in theater, you know, throughout college. And then when I graduated, I started singing in the style of Buddy Love and, you know, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Mel Torme, that style. And actually, that part of my career took off more than theater, so I had a diversion for a while where I put bands together, we toured the country. But my first love has always been theater.
Thank you. Jeff, did you have a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
My question is for you, Mr. Holmes. How did you and Mr. Hamlish, how did you musicalize this show? How did you approach it as a musical project?
Well, we had this incredible opportunity. You know, musicals, as we've been rehearsing this week, I've been reminded, I just want to add one thing quickly to what you're saying. Michael talks about how there are these two people that he inhabits, that created by Jerry Lewis, Buddy Love. And the other day, I'm so buying into what he's doing. The other day I said, oh, you're fine, you have time to make the costume change because you're not in the next scene. And completely forgetting he was Buddy Love in the next scene. I keep thinking I'm going to have to talk to Buddy about that. I'll say, no, not for you. So I'm really caught up in that magic. When you write a musical, you have this incredible opportunity that you're not allowed in any other format. I mean, Eugene O'Neill tried it a little in Strange Interlude, but outside of that, you have a chance to allow the audience to hear the inner thoughts of all your characters. And that really doesn't happen. It's something we get to do in a musical that Jerry didn't actually have the opportunity to do in a movie. You can't suddenly have the person turn to you and sort of reveal to you, even though they don't know you're there, how they feel. And so we sat down thinking, what does Julius Kelp feel about being Julius Kelp? And because you don't hear a lot of it. We realized what an opportunity we had. We also got to think about what Stella, played by Marissa, what her dream is, why she's come to college, what she hopes to do with her life. And then we got to really fascinatingly think about, what does Buddy Love think of Buddy Love? Does he only love himself? And how firm is his confidence? Is he unshakable? Is he unquenchable? So as we approached this, we realized we had this rare opportunity to take one of the classic American comedies of all time and give an audience something additional that they've never had before, which was a chance to just peer into these very unique characters. And I think that's what we operated from. And one of the things that I hope we're achieving here, and I believe we are, is I'm surprised what a very touching and human story this is, because it turns out in the almost half century since Jerry created an audacious comedy, that we've learned through the internet that we all have sort of a Jekyll and Hyde to us. We all have the public persona we put on, and then we have the moment that we share with our closest friends. And I can't speak enough about, you have to understand what the movie was in its time. I was an adolescent. I was 14 when it came out. And people don't realize what a daring move it was for Jerry Lewis to make that movie. Jerry was making film after film after film that were huge hits for Paramount Pictures. And there was a persona, a Jerry Lewis persona, that inhabited all of those films, from the days of Martin and Lewis into all the incredible soul adventures that he made. And these are classic films. And then, I don't mean to paraphrase your own history here, Jerry, but my understanding is Paramount learned that you weren't going to play that character, that you weren't going to be Jerry in the movie. You were going to invent these two very different characters that the audience had never met before, Julius Kelp and Buddy Love. And is it true? Were they nervous about that?
They were nervous about African Queen. They were nervous about West Side Story. They were nervous about shorts and two-reelers. They weren't really comfortable with not seeing it, but reading it was a different process. And I said, gentlemen, don't read it. Don't get yourself confused. I'll show you the footage and then we'll release it. And I said it quietly and like a gentleman, and they were scared to death. Would I walk away from this? Or all of that garbage that happens. But we made it. We made it and didn't know what we had. Buddy Love to me. I don't want to interrupt your moment, but I got to remember to tell them this. That Buddy Love to me was obnoxious, ill-mannered, insensitive, totally his own man in his own skin. And I'm thinking, I got to put him up on the screen and not have the people throwing tomatoes. I got to put him up there so that they can identify with him. And I did Julius Kelp of the 50-day shooting schedule. I shot everything of Julius Kelp first, constantly procrastinating about getting into Buddy Love. I hated him with a passion. I still do. I hated him because he was a combination of all the ugly things I've seen people do one to another. And I had the love of Kelp and the uncertainty of love. And I put it together. Finally, my production manager came to me one day and said, "You've run out of what to shoot. You have to shoot Buddy Love tomorrow." I said, at least I got the balance of the day to throw up. And that's the way I did it. And the last 24 days was all Buddy Love. Prior to that was all Kelp. And I was comfortable with that because I had such a... You know, when you write something, you're guilty of being the motivator. And I knew I had him pretty ugly. But then I'm getting hundreds and hundreds of letters from all over the world. They loved Buddy Love. The women loved him. Holy Christ. But you hope for that. I wasn't hoping for it because I didn't think it would happen. But it happened. Go ahead, Rupert.
One of the things that I think was inherent in the film that we've tried to bring out is the fact that there are times when I feel that Buddy Love knows that Julius Kelp is inside. And it's kind of that moment at a party where I've often thought that you know, you think you're faking it. You're putting on a public, your presentational self. And you think if they only knew that I'm really not very certain of what I'm doing here, and until I had this to hold my hand, I felt like my hands were feet. And I think we've been able to sort of play with that. We've been able to take in the musical, the story, one step further because we go a little past a point in the movie where you suddenly see what it would be like if there were only Buddy Love and there was no Julius Kelp. And I think the final outcome of the story is one that speaks to the gentle people, the Julius Kelp that Jerry felt so comfortable inhabiting when he shot the first half of the film. It's a long answer. I've gotten way off your point, but I hope I did in the beginning.
No, that's all right. It was beautiful. I loved hearing it myself. Yes, right.
Well, to follow up on that question, could you describe the style of the music? Is it conventional Broadway, pop, or retro, that kind of thing?
It's early Rococo. with some Byzantine influences. Honegger and Stravinsky are really come into play in the overture, but then we really stick to basic early impressionism. I've been asked that actually. I'm not trying to. It's hard to describe. As a composer myself, I can tell you that it's really hard to write about music. When people say something is Wagnerian, they mean it's loud or big or something like that. But I was asked by a casting director to describe it for the actors, and I'm trying to think what I told them. I think it's musically. There are moments that are absolute vintage Marvin Hamlish, and that's really good news for everybody that's going to hear this. There's some ballads in here that remind you of absolute classic Marvin Hamlish ballads. They're really beautiful. A lot of the music is charm music. It's character music, and in that regard, I would say that it is within what you would think of as a traditional Broadway show. We have a couple of rock elements because this is the '60s, so the Ventures were at the top of the charts. This is just pre-Beatles, and of course, on the other side of it, with Buddy Love, beautifully voiced by Michael, you've got the coolest kind of swing band sound. I thought Mel Torme was a good analogy. It's Dean Martin, it's Frank Sinatra, it's Count Basie, kind of Count Basie music that would always somehow creep into a Jerry Lewis film. So I think traditional Broadway with a lot of character work and a couple of contemporary, meaning 1962, tinges.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Jack.
Question for Michael. Did you meet a lot of resistance about your idea? Did you meet a lot of resistance about your idea to take Nutty Professor to the stage? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Well, as a performer, you always meet resistance. It's constant rejection. It's constantly people saying no. So fortunately, we all kind of get, I don't want to say we get used to that, but that does become something that you have to deal with. But the good news for me was that I met a guy when I had this idea, and he's sitting right there, Ned McLeod, and when I presented the idea to him, he was nothing but yes. He said, this is the greatest idea I've heard. Out of all the ideas, I had a lot of ideas about what I might do in my career at this time, about 8 years ago. And I presented him to Ned because he's the kind of organized person that was helping me out, and we were trying to find a direction together, and he wanted to be a part of that. And when I presented this idea, along with half a dozen or maybe a dozen others, this was the only one he wanted to concentrate on, and he said, let's see if we can get this thing going. So I got a yes, and if I hadn't gotten that yes, I think it would have just remained a boyhood dream and something that maybe influenced all of the other stuff I did in my career, but not like this, this directly. And then some months later, we were able to get a meeting with Mr. Lewis, and we got another yes. So I have to say, it wasn't as there wasn't as many no's as you usually face in a project. Fortunately. Now there were challenges for the next 7 years that we all faced, of course.
Thanks, Michael. Anything else?